Over all my years of playing Magic, I've built hundreds of decks online, but only 9 of those commander decks have made it into the real world. These are all of my commander decks in one video. There are links to every single deck that I talked about in the description. I had to upload them all for this video. First is my Feather the Redeemed deck. Feather reads, when you cast an instant or sorcery spell that targets a creature you control, exile that card instead of putting it into your graveyard. If you do, return it to your hand at the beginning of the next end step. This is amazing because I can use many cards that target over and over again. For example, Defiant Strike is a white for an instant. Target creature gets +1/+0 until end of turn. Draw a card. If I go and target Feather with my Defiant Strike, I can then exile it and get it back to my hand again. I can cast that every single turn and draw tons of cards. So that's the first thing this deck has. Tons and tons of draw a card effects. The other thing this has is pump effects. I can run cards which will make Feather bigger, such as Titan Strength, which is red for an instant. Target creature gets +3/+1 until end of turn. Target Feather with that, then get it back to my hand. So I can go and kill someone by attacking them, and then the next turn I'm going to be able to kill my opponent as well. There's a lot of different variety of these effects, and I'm running quite a few of these. I want to be able to 1 or 2 shot my opponents just by casting a few instants. The next deck is my Krav the Redeemed and Regna the Redeemer deck. I brewed this deck entirely out of my collection. I didn't buy a single card. All of these cards I just had before, and I threw them together. Krav allows me to sacrifice X creatures to draw cards and gain life. Regna, which is the partner, so I have 2 commanders, will give me 2 1/1s at the beginning of each end step if I gained life that turn. Essentially, when I have both of these out, I can go ahead and gain 2 life and draw 2 cards every single turn, as long as I have a black mana to pay. That's what makes this deck work so well. The commanders are just powerful enough that it works on its own. My cards help a lot too. I have cheap cards that I can sacrifice to my commander to draw cards. Something like Doom Dissenter and Reassembling Skeleton will allow me to recur it. So I can just pay 3 mana to draw a card, gain a life, and put a +1/+1 counter on Krav. I of course have many pieces of removal. Murder's Rider is pretty good because I can use it as a piece of removal, then cast it and get the creature out. Because it has lifelink, I can either use it in combat to gain life and get tokens with Regna, or I can sacrifice it to Krav to draw cards. And Butcher of Malakir will make each opponent sacrifice a creature whenever one of my creatures dies. So if I have this out with both of my commanders, all of my opponents will be sacrificing 2 creatures every single turn, and no one can support a board state under those conditions. There's also my payoff cards. Things like Corpse Knight and Zool of Port Cutthroat will make my opponents lose life while I'm doing the Krav and Regna loop. And Illusionist Bracers will give me 2 Krav triggers instead of 1 whenever I activate Krav. Next commander is Veyran, Voice of Duality. Veyran, Voice of Duality, is 1 blue-red for a 2/2 legendary creature of free wizard. Magecraft. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, Veyran, Voice of Duality, gets +1/+1 until end of turn. If casting or copying an instant or sorcery spell causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. Keep in mind, it will double its own trigger. So every time we cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, it will get +2/+2 until end of turn. Now this is based off of the precon. I don't remember the name, I'll put that up on screen. But I decided to change the commanders and change the theme. I have now turned this into a Voltron deck. It's extremely similar in concept to my Feather deck. I'm going to use a lot of pump cards and make my Veyran huge. Something like Screaming Fury, which is 2 and a red for sorcery. Target creature gets +5/+0 and gains haste until end of turn. That's 3 mana Tana to give my commander +7/+0. I also have a lot of cantrips, that way I can cast these, give Veyran +2/+0, and then draw a card. Hopefully I can cast these repeatedly until I have enough damage to win the game. Stormkiln Artist is amazing because it will give me a treasure every time I cast or copy an instant or sorcery. It makes it so much easier to just keep on casting things over and over again. Next commander is Kynaios and Tiro of Meletis. Kynaios and Tiro of Meletis is red, green, white, blue for a legendary creature human soldier 2/8. At the beginning of your end step, draw a card. Each player may put a land card from his or her hand onto the battlefield. Then each opponent who didn't draws a card. This is not the group hug landfall deck that I recently made a video on. This is a Brash Taunter effect deck. Brash Taunter is 4 and a red for a 1/1 with indestructible. Whenever Brash Taunter is dealt damage, it deals that much damage to target opponent. 2 red tap, Brash Taunter fights another target creature. I have tons of cards similar to Brash Taunter that will deal damage to my opponents whenever they are dealt damage. In addition to that, I have cards such as Swans of Brynard Ghoul, which give other advantages for taking damage. Combine this with cards that deal huge amounts of damage, and I can quickly win. So I get a few of these damage effects out, and then I play a damage board wipe. One example of this is Star of Extinction. 5 red for a sorcery. Destroy target land. Star of Extinction deals 20 damage to each creature and each planeswalker. So if I have a Brash Taunter out, I will deal 20 damage to my opponent, and all of the creatures will be gone. I get to keep my Brash Taunter because it has indestructible. Blasphemous Act is very similar. 8 and a red for sorcery, it costs 1 less to cast for each creature on the battlefield, and it deals 13 damage to each creature. And Grothama, All Devouring, which does not wrath our opponent's board, but it says other creatures have, when this creature attacks, you may have it fight Grothama All Devouring. Fighting means Grothama will deal damage equal to its power to that creature, and that creature will deal damage equal to its power to Grothama. And when Grothama leaves the battlefield, each player draws cards equal to the amount of damage dealt to Grothama this turn by sources they control. This works on both sides. It can deal huge amounts of damage to my stuff, and it can draw me cards from dealing damage to it. But if we want this damage to go absolutely insane, we need damage duplicators. Something like Dictate of the Twin Gods. 3 red for an enchantment with flash. If a source would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals double that damage to that permanent or player instead. And Fiery Emancipation, which is 3 red for an enchantment. If a source you control would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals triple that damage to that permanent or player instead. So let's think about Brash Taunter, Blasphemous Act, and a Fiery Emancipation. Blasphemous Act is going to deal 13 damage to my Brash Taunter. Well, Fiery Emancipation sees that effect and says, oh, well, actually, no. It's gonna deal 39 damage. Brash Taunter says, oh, okay, well, I can deal 39 damage to an opponent. Well, Fiery Emancipation sees that effect. It says, hold on, we need to triple that. I am going to deal 117 damage. That is insane. Make sure to watch to the end because I saved some of my favorite decks for the end of the video. My next commander is the Locust God, which is 4 blue-red for a 4/4 with flying. When you draw a card, create a 1/1 blue and red insect creature token with flying and haste. So we just want to draw a lot of cards so we can make a lot of insects. So what's the most obvious and easy way to draw tons of cards? Yes, wheels. Think Windfall. Windfall is 2 and a blue for sorcery. Each player discards his or her hand, then draws cards equal to the greatest number of cards a player discarded this way. Combine this with the Locust God, and I can most likely create 7 insects for only 3 mana. And I get a fresh new hand, so I might even be able to cast another wheel. I have a multitude of effects like this, and they really make the deck work well. I've also got a lot of other good draw effects. Things like Biden of Thassa and Skull Clamp take advantage of the insects we already have to draw a ton of cards. Consecrated Sphinx is just amazing card draw, and Toothy Imaginary Friend will get counters whenever I draw. When it dies, I get to draw a card for every counter on it. My next deck is my Reyhan, Last of the Abzan, and Slurrk all-ingesting deck. I decided to purchase this deck after I finished one of my videos. It's really fun, and I quite like playing it. Reyhan basically says if one of my creatures will die, I can take the counters that were already on that creature and move it onto another target creature. So first, I'm gonna try and get some cards to get counters out on the field. That's what makes it so I can start going off and actually get value. Then I need some creatures. I'm gonna run some mana dorks, some token creators, and just a whole lot of creatures to make it so that I can get this engine off. Then I need what really makes this work, counter addition. When I sacrifice my creature and move the counters onto another thing, I need to be adding counters. This way I can sacrifice tons of creatures, add tons of counters, and attack for the win. Another important aspect is sacrifice outlet. There's no reliable way to get rid of our creatures except for these. But Altar of Dementia is the most powerful card in this deck. It says, sacrifice a creature. Target player puts a number of cards equal to the sacrificed creature's power from the top of their library into their graveyard. I would not play this until you are planning to win. The reason that this is so powerful is because you can sacrifice a creature with tons of counters on it, mill your opponents for tons, and then move those counters onto something else. As those counters move along, you can end up milling your opponents for 20 or 30 cards every single time you sacrifice a creature. With your tokens out, you should easily be able to win in this situation. My next deck is my Najeela, the Blade Blossom, EDH proxy deck. If you look at a lot of these cards on the back, they are not real. They do look quite good though. Najeela, the Blade Blossom, is 2 and a red for 3/2. Whenever a warrior attacks, you may have its controller create a 1/1 white warrior token that's tapped and attacking. Wooburg, untap all attacking creatures. They gain trample, lifelink, and haste until end of turn. After this phase, there's an additional combat phase. Activate this ability only during combat, and it's a 3/2. This is an insanely powerful deck. It is by far my most powerful deck, and it's intended to play in max power. Unfortunately, I don't really play max power very much. I've played this a total of 2 times, and it's honestly quite sad. I would like to play this more, but I've also kind of learned maybe CEDH isn't my thing. As with just about any CEDH deck, it has the Thoracle, Demonic Consultation, Tutors, all that type of stuff. And because it's Najeela, I can attack with warriors. It has efficient mana, efficient removal, efficient draw, you know, CEDH stuff. My next deck is my Tana the Bloodsower and Tymna the Weaver deck. Tymna the Weaver is 1 and a black for a 2/2 legendary creature human cleric with a lifelink. At the beginning of your post-combat main phase, you may pay X life, where X is the number of opponents that were dealt combat damage this turn. If you do, draw X card. And Tana, the Bloodsower, is 2 red-green for a 2/2 with trample. When Tana, the Bloodsower, deals combat damage to a player, create that many 1/1 green sapperling creature tokens. This is a combat deck, but it really focuses around team pump effects. Say I have a Collective Blessing, which gives creatures I control +3/+3. If I give Tana the Bloodsower +3/+3, deal combat damage to a player, well, it's a 5/5, so I'm gonna get 5/1/1. Oh, but those are pumped +3/+3. When Tana gets pumped and your team gets pumped, it just gets very powerful very quickly. And I of course have Tymna there to help me along. I have a lot of team pump effects which work in various ways, and most good combat cards you can think of. Serra Ascendant, Sword of Feast and Famine, and more. Next is my favorite commander deck. You can see more details on my ultimate guide to Zada Hedron Grinder video. Zada Hedron Grinder is 3 and a red for a 3/3 legendary creature goblin ally. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell that targets only Zada Hedron Grinder, copy that spell for each other creature you control that the spell could target. Each copy targets a different one of those creatures. This is a very powerful effect, and this is what we're going to be searching for with General Tazri every single time. General Tazri is 4 and a white for a legendary creature human ally, 3/4. When it enters the battlefield, you may search your library for an ally creature card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. So we're just gonna use that effect to find Zada. And this is a 5-color commander, so we can have access to all the good cards. So why is Zada so good? Well, let's take a look at a Flicker card. Say Flicker, the namesake. For example, remove target non-token permanent from the game, then return it to play under its owner's control. Let's cast that targeting Zada Hedron Grinder. Well, it's gonna copy it to every single creature I control. Now it's going to exile all of my creatures, then bring them back. Now, this seems like an utterly useless effect until you take another look at the ally tribe. Take, for example, Kalastria Healer. 1 and a black for a 1/2 creature vampire cleric ally with Rally. Whenever Kalastria Healer or another ally enters the battlefield under your control, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. If we begin to flicker all of my allies over and over again, you can see how this begins to add up. But it can get even more crazy with copy effect. Take Quasi-Duplicate, for example. Create a token that's a copy of target creature you control. So if we go ahead and copy my Kalastria Healer, I'll get 2 ETBs for every ally that enters. And that gets quite good fast. I even have multiple of this type of effect, so I could end up with 4 Kalastria Healers. Things like Crimson Wisps are still quite good. It is red for an instant, target creature becomes red and gains haste until end of turn. Draw a card. When that replicates with Zada, it becomes a 1 red mana card that will draw a card for each creature we control. Plus good ETB effects such as Perforos, God of the Forge, which will deal 2 damage to each opponent whenever a creature enters the battlefield under my control, and Panharmonicon, which will double my ETB triggers. There is a link in the description to every single one of these lists. I uploaded them all online just so that you could see them. And I also have some modern decks which I figured I'd give a quick mention to. This is my zombie deck. It's mostly just full of Anthem effects. It is the first deck that I ever actually purchased cards for, rather than just building out of my collection. I still quite enjoy playing it, and it is quite janky, and there are certainly some suboptimal cards in it, but I like keeping it the way it is. And my Enchantress deck. At one point, I wanted to turn my Tymna and Tana deck into an Enchantress deck, so I went out and purchased tons of Enchantress cards. I ended up realizing that that was actually a terrible idea. Trying to make a combat deck and an Enchantress deck work at the same time just did not work at all. So I pulled out all those cards. A while later, I stumbled into all these cards, and I thought, oh well, I guess I'll just throw a modern Enchantress deck together. And so I did. The modern decks are also linked in the description. Subscribe because I'm trying to reach 500 subscribers by 2022. And depending on which of these decks sparked your interest, watch any of these videos next for more details.